Hello, everyone. I'm Lynn Cremando, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Sat Dharam Kaur. She's a certified yoga teacher, trainer, and yoga teacher, author, and a naturopathic doctor practicing in Owen Sound, Ontario. She's been educating women in aspects of breast health and working with women with breast cancer since graduating from the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine in 1989. She's developed an intensive 12-part breast health yoga training designed to educate women and girls and to help reduce their risk of breast cancer, but also to help women to recover better from breast cancer using natural therapies in conjunction with conventional diagnostic and treatment options. Sat Dharam has written several books: A Call to Women, The Healthy Breast Program and Workbook, The Complete Natural Medicine Guide to Breast Cancer, and The Complete Natural Medicine Guide to Women's Health. So welcome, Sat Dharam.
Thank you so much.
It is such an honor to speak with you today. And I wonder if we could just get the scary part out of the way.
What's the scary part?
We're going to talk about a little bit about breast cancer. So most people, I think, living today either know someone or have experienced breast cancer. So in their lives, somewhere there's breast cancer. And for the women who haven't, there's almost this anchor or this weight over our heads that it's an inevitability, that it's coming. Can you talk, first of all, in general, about the prevalence of breast cancer? Because this is something you've really delved deeply into.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to. So in North America, it's about 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer at some point in their lives. And the older we get, the more likely that is. So the risk goes up with aging. And that risk is gently rising for the most part over the last decade. It's also rising in many other places in the world, more than it is in North America. For example, in China and India, in recent years, the breast cancer incidence has jumped up quite a lot. And when you compare countries around the world, the highest incidence is found in France, Denmark, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Those 4 countries are the top, right? And then less developed countries like Africa has the least amount of breast cancer. China used to be quite low, but in the last few years, the incidence in China has jumped, making China having the most women with breast cancer just because of the population. But the number of women per 100,000 women is still relatively low in China, but it's increasing a lot in the last few years. So my, having seen this, because I've been working with women with breast cancer for several decades, it's alarming, and my passion around educating women is just to try to bring this down to protect future generations. That's really where my motivation comes from.
Do you think there's a connection between those societies? You know, they say causation and correlation and all that, but do you draw any conclusions?
I do. I draw a lot of conclusions, and the beautiful part is I've been able to travel around the world teaching my Healthy Breast program in these countries. I'm able to compare the diets. I'm able to compare the lifestyles. I'm able to ask the women themselves, what's going on here? How come Belgium has the highest breast cancer rate in the world? So I was in a room with maybe 15 women, and I asked them that question maybe 3 years ago. And they all said at the same time, simultaneously, stress. They just said stress. So they knew. And I said, well, what's stressful for you here in Belgium? And the comment was, well, we have to do everything. Women have to do everything. We don't have any help. We don't have an extended family system, for example, like they do in China or in Italy. And women work, and they have to take care of the kids, and they have to do the cooking. These women do everything. So they said that they feel isolated. So that's a big causative factor, actually, on the emotional level, the sense of isolation. And they're the way to overwork. So we know that stress adds to all kinds of chronic diseases, including cancer and breast cancer. And Belgium doesn't have a particularly great diet. They don't eat a lot of vegetables, and there's a prevalence of meat and dairy. So when you look at those 4 countries, France, Denmark, Netherlands, and Belgium, if I was to ask you, what do those 4 countries have in common? What would your first remark be?
Well, I guess dairy is my
Yeah, it's cheese.
is what comes to my mind is cheese. Yeah.
So the fat in the cheese and in the dairy is a risk factor. I'm not sure if it's a primary risk factor, but it's a risk factor in those countries. And for example, in China, where there's very low breast cancer, they don't generally eat cheese. They're starting to eat it now. They're starting to drink more alcohol now. They're starting to eat more sugar now in China. So that's causing the incidence to go up. Whereas if you look at other countries where there's low breast cancer, most of the countries where there's low breast cancer, there's no cheese.
Interesting, because I think if we looked at heart disease numbers, they'd have lower incidences of heart disease because of other factors. But in this one factor,
yeah,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, so that's one factor. There's multiple factors, and I could go into a lot more, but that's just one. You know, alcohol is another risk factor. So there'd be more alcohol consumption in women, perhaps in France. Another factor is low vitamin D. So the northern countries, less sunlight, less vitamin D. Another factor is light at night. So the more civilized countries with the more lights on at night means lower melatonin. That increases the risk. Tremendous number of factors on all levels that have to be thought of.
Interesting, because what you're describing is that you've almost walked the path of breast cancer. You've actually.
I have. I've taught the Healthy Breast program in 15 different countries.
Interesting.
And I'm very curious. And I eat the breakfast in that country, and I say, wow, this is either terrible or this is amazing. When I had breakfast, I was in China in December. And the breakfast mostly was at this hotel. I'm not sure if this is the traditional Chinese breakfast, but the breakfast at the hotel was about, 8 different kinds of steamed greens you could choose from.
It sounds delicious to me.
And some soft tofu, kind of like a pudding, a little bit of watery rice, but just a little bit, a small piece of sweet potato, no sugar, next to no toast, no cereal, the stuff that we typically eat.
Yeah.
And all the women that I was teaching in China were skinny, not just short. Chinese. They were thin, and I was watching them eat, and they ate a lot. It wasn't that they weren't eating very much, but it's what they're eating. And so they had kind of a low carb diet. When they have rice, they just have a little rice. It's mostly green vegetables. So that was fascinating.
That's like my favorite food. So I'd be very happy. I was afraid you were going to say fish.
No.
Or fish soup or fish stock or something, but
no, it was mostly greens.
I would sign on for that.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you also notice commonalities in treatment and also, because you're a naturopath, the degree to which complementary medicines are coming into the treatment cycle of cancer, breast cancer?
Well, complementary medicines are available in North America for sure, widely, and in not all countries in Europe, but in Germany they are, in Switzerland they are, in France they are, but not so much. Where was I? Sardinia? No, Italy didn't have very much complementary medicine. China, no, zero. They can see an acupuncturist and an herbalist, but and that's great. I strongly recommend Chinese medicine and acupuncture, but in terms of the understanding we have now in naturopathic medicine, in terms of supplements and specific herbs and vitamins and how they affect cancer, we're very privileged in North America with what is accessible to us because of the naturopathic profession, I believe, in Canada and the United States.
One of the things that I think happens to women who come to the other side of breast cancer is they never quite make it to the other side. There's always that there are residual side effects. There's the sort of the lymphatic thing that goes on, or the, or there's just that fear that it's over your, you got to look over your shoulder to see if it's coming back. Has that been your experience, that aftercare includes kind of some form of resilience and
Well, let me comment. First of all, almost any type of cancer should be considered like a chronic disease from a proactive perspective, because it could come back anytime. Basically, if there is one cell left that was floating around, after the surgery, after the chemotherapy, etc., if the right conditions are there, then it can start again, right? Having said that, what I usually say to women, the women that I work with, is, okay, can we shift our mindset and just say now that, now that the treatments are over, now that you're on this dietary regimen, this supplement regimen, you're taking better care of yourself, you're exercising, you're doing all this, can we now frame it that you want longevity? Because the same diet, the same supplements you're taking, the same herbs you're taking generally increase longevity. They'd be the same things that we would use. So let's turn this into an anti-aging program. And that's a nice way, because the fear isn't good for anybody, So in some ways, in answer to your question, the answer is no, because the women I work with feel empowered. They know what they're taking, why they're taking it. They know what the supplements do. And I like to work with them long term. It's not just, okay, here you go, you're going to your treatments, I'm going to get you through this. It has to be a long-term lifestyle shift. That's really important. And so the relationship between the practitioner and the patient is very important, and that it's understood that we're going to have this partnership for a long time until the lifestyle is integrated. It's just the way they now live, the way they now eat. That's what's important.
The two things that came out of that for me are the two words reframing and empowerment.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very strong message and a hopeful message, because we got through the scary part. So I want to switch to the reframing and empowering part.
Yeah. And my belief is, this is after a lot of years of working with women with breast cancer, is no disease happens for no reason. It's not that anyone is to blame, but is every illness, no matter what it is, I think the only really healthy way to look at it is as some sort of an opportunity for transformation, an opportunity for learning, an opportunity to change one's view on something, an opportunity to heal a deep emotional wound. And so I more often than not, the women I work with at some point say, this is the best thing that ever happened to me, after they're through the treatments, because it gave them the permission, the capacity, the motivation to change something that wasn't working in their life. And they know that.
So the program that you have designed encompasses, I took this right off of your website: lifestyle, diet, nutritional therapies, breathing practices, Kundalini yoga, meditation, exercise, and psycho-spiritual work. So it's, in other words, comprehensive and quite holistic.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about how you came into this work and how you got to this very robust program? Because it sounds like you've covered the gamut there.
Yeah. Well, my nature is to see the big picture and to be a synthesizer. That's sort of how my mind works. But when I was in my final year of naturopathic college, so this would be 1988, a woman who lived in the same house as I lived with a lot of people in a group house, was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was a student, and she was looking for support, and she was doing the conventional route, and she was seeing another naturopathic doctor. There were few and far between at that time, but she was seeing somebody. And I recognized that there wasn't anything out there at the time that was sort of a systematic approach to help women with breast cancer. And they were looking for, what do I do? Yeah, I can do chemo and radiation, but what else? And I don't know what it was in me, but I just started to research it and started to put things together. First, I guess, on a dietary perspective, what should people be eating? And I think the next was probably nutritional. What are the supplements that are helpful? And then I started to look at, well, what's causing this? Why are women getting breast cancer? And then I ran up against all the environmental links to breast cancer, and I was absolutely horrified. And I couldn't believe it. And I was grieving, actually, for several years, I would say, just coming to terms with what was going on the planet, to Mother Earth, and how that was impacting our breasts. And I learned that that was impacting not only women, but also other mammals, like whales were getting breast cancer, polar bears were getting breast cancer, all these other species were getting breast cancer. And then I realized we have a huge problem here, and it's not being addressed. There's nothing out there to teach women how to prevent this disease or how to reduce our risk. And this something in me just became active and says, okay, this is something I can do to improve the world. You know, I can do this to improve the world, to educate women in the way to reduce breast cancer. By doing that, maybe there'll be a little bit more environmental activism. Maybe we'll protect some of these other mammals. Maybe we'll protect the water. Maybe we'll protect the soil. You know, I recognized it went that deep. And I've always had a great love for nature, for the Great Lakes. I live on Lake Huron. You know, I live very close to Lake Huron. And I spent a lot of time outside as a child. So I have this tremendous love for nature. And I live we have an organic farm and I have an orchard. I'm trying to grow every possible fruit in a holistic way using permaculture. And so it was my way of empowering myself to do something in the midst of this perceived hopelessness otherwise. Either I'm going to feel hopeless and despair at what's going on in the world, or I'm going to be an agent of change. And so way back then, very tentatively at the start, I sort of said, okay, I'll try to be this agent of change and see what happens.
So what has happened, would you say?
Well, you know, I have been teaching this program basically since 1990 in one way or another in small workshops. I've educated women all over the world. I've tried to catalyze them to teach other women. It's happening in a few countries. We put out this campaign every October with 31 tips for breast health, and do this social media campaign. We have these tips translated into 15 different languages, and people share them on social media. It's very slow. I wanted to start a revolution, but it's very slow. And the big factor is women are in denial. It's too scary.
It is very scary, yeah.
It's the biggest factor, is that we just don't want to go there. We don't want to look at it because it's too big, too scary, and we don't know what to do. And we're all so busy that it's one more thing to try to look at, you know. So I think that's the block, is the fear.
Do you think it's more likely that you are going to see women who already have cancer, or do you spend more time helping women to avoid cancer? And
well,
can you avoid?
Yeah. You can certainly, you know, we can reduce our risk. That's what we can absolutely do. In my naturopathic practice, mostly I see the women with breast cancer, because those are the ones who come in, right?
Right.
And I would say maybe at least 40%, 50% of my practice is women with breast cancer. When I teach the Healthy Rest program, it's probably 2/3 women interested in prevention and 1/3 women who currently have or have had breast cancer that want to figure out what else they can do. But it's really, the Healthy Breast Program is really a whole lifestyle program for women, period. Forget about breast cancer, it's just for women's health, you know. But the breast is a way in, and for me, the breast is a symbol of the way we relate to the earth, you know. What is it? It's our capacity to nourish our young. Our whole survival depends on our capacity to nourish our young. And that's being threatened right now just because of the conditions that women face and the conditions of the environments, and that's worth saving, you know. So that's where my juice comes from and the education comes from.
It sounds like, I was going to ask you what was the one thing you wish women who didn't have breast cancer would pay attention to, but it sounds like what you're saying is everything.
Yeah, everything. But you know, we have these 12 tips for breast health that are on the website, mamalive.net, if anyone wants to see them. So there's very simple things like including organic soy in your diet. People are confused about that. They think soy is a phytoestrogen, but it's actually quite protective, including flax seeds, taking vitamin D, exercising every day, reducing or eliminating alcohol. You know, there's just so many, having more of a vegetarian diet. There's a ton of things that we know are protective, that we could dramatically reduce the incidence of breast cancer if women just did 3 of these things. If it was just globally known, yes, you have to have flax seeds every day. Yes, you have to check your vitamin D once a year and make sure it's high normal. You know, just a few things would make a huge difference. It's not rocket science.
Most of the things you mentioned would be quite familiar to a yogi, to a yoga practitioner. So I'm wondering if you were a naturopath who became a yogi, or a yogi who became a naturopath.
I was doing both at the same time. Let me just think. I was a yogi first, and I started off studying biology, and I wanted to become a marine biologist to study humpback whales. And I wanted to understand what they were saying. That was my early passion. And then I drifted into biology, and then I studied art because I wanted to express myself. So I went through art school. And then I had to integrate the science and the art, and that was naturopathic medicine. But I started practicing yoga at age 19, and that was a big part of my study and practice at that time. I fell in love with yoga and was a very serious practitioner. I still am.
Can you talk about, because we are a yoga, centered website, specifically the role of yoga in some of these areas, empowerment and reframing and creating healthy lifestyle? Can you just talk about how you use the tools of yoga a little bit?
Sure. So, Kundalini yoga specifically includes many different breathing exercises, and then we call them kriyas, which are a series of one asana after another, mostly with some movement in them, as well as mantra meditations. So when you look at how that affects health, first of all, we know that the immune system works much better when people practice yoga. So that's been proven. There's these two components of the immune system called a Th1 response and a Th2 response. The Th1 response is needed to fight autoimmune diseases and cancer. And what turns on that Th1 response is yoga. Some of the things are yoga, breathing exercises, meditation, Tai Chi. So those, and moderate exercise, but not vigorous exercise. So if women practice yoga, their immune systems will work better to prevent or protect them from cancer. So that's one piece. The other piece is that chronic disease, including cancer, is often related to stress. And the breathing exercises, the yoga, the meditations obviously induce a relaxation response. There's Shavasana as part of almost every yoga class. And so that time that we give ourselves during yoga practice to relax is really, really important, and activates the vagus nerve, allows us to digest better, breathe more deeply, all that stuff. And that generates a healing response. So to have that healing response, we need to be in a relaxed state. It's not going to happen otherwise. the other piece around the yoga is, and the meditation is, you know, developing this capacity to listen to ourselves, to connect with our intuition. So that if something's not right in our life, if we've been going along for a long time on a certain path, and maybe we're pushing ourselves, or we're burning ourselves out, you know, that inner listening that happens through meditation can guide us to change our direction, so we don't need a disease to change our direction. And also the lymphatic system, you know, the lymphatic system needs movement and deep breathing to be active. The lymphatic system of the breasts is very important to cleanse and remove the environmental toxins from the breast area. So we need to be moving the arms, moving the upper body to open up the lymphatic circulation to the breast. So these are some of the ways that yoga can be extremely beneficial in decreasing the risk of breast cancer.
You touched on soy, so I just want to go back there for a moment, because I'm not gonna be good at this. You'll be much more, but I can remember reading how soy is a terrible thing because of estrogen. So can you talk a little bit about the hormonal link of cancer, breast cancer, and the hormonal link, and also how those tools of yoga might also help regulate the hormonal balance?
Okay. So there's a whole lot of different hormones that either increase the risk of breast cancer or decrease the risk of breast cancer. So let me just name them. So everyone's familiar with estrogen. And what estrogen does is it causes cells to divide quicker, breast cells to divide quicker. So if you have a lot of estrogen, you're going to have bigger breasts because the cells are dividing quicker. It's also possible then that as the cells divide quicker, that a mistake is made in cell division that then could lead to a mutation if enough mistakes are made with each of those cell divisions, which then ultimately could lead to cancer. So excess estrogen is a risk factor for breast cancer. So women who take the birth control pill, women who are on hormone replacement therapy, women who start their periods early, women who have a late menopause, women who don't breastfeed, all of those increase the risk to various degrees of breast cancer because of the excess estrogen. Now, the estrogen doesn't do anything unless it attaches to a receptor in the cell. Estrogen by itself doesn't cause the problem. It's the estrogen attached to the receptor that causes this increased cell division. So, and you have a certain number of receptors for estrogen. Every hormone needs a receptor for it to do anything. So let's say you have, I don't know, 100,000 receptors for estrogen in your breasts. I'm not quite sure how many there would be, but let's say you had 100,000. If you find something else to block that receptor with that's weaker than the estrogens your body makes, then you're protecting yourself from breast cancer. And so there are foods that are known as phytoestrogens that just do that. They're much weaker than the body's estrogen, but they attach to that receptor, they plug it up so the body's estrogen can't attach. And the 5 main phytoestrogens that have the highest amount are flaxseed is number 1, soy is number 2, pumpkin seed number 3, and then red clover sprouts and mung bean sprouts are 4 and 5. So we want to have those phytoestrogens as a regular part of our diet. And some people have allergies to soy, well, then they can use the pumpkin seeds, you know. Mm-hmm. So luckily there's a few of them for us to be using. So that blocks the activity of estrogen, because the phytoestrogens are too weak to actually cause the increased cell division, but they just sit on those receptors.
Are some forms of soy better than others? I've heard that the fermented soy is healthier.
It really isn't. You know, the research is just done on soy, period. Okay. So I would say it should be organic, and that's it. Just make it non-GMO organic soy. And if you have an allergy to it, don't use it. If you have autoimmune thyroid disease, minimize it. But otherwise, I think it's good for most people, especially vegetarians. It's the main source of protein for many vegetarians. So it's a healthy food as long as it's in organic. Yeah. Great. Now, let me just say a little bit about the other hormones, because people think mostly about estrogen and not much else. Mm-hmm. But breast cancer is also caused by too much insulin. So that would be like sugar and excess carbs and diabetes, that increases breast cancer risk more than estrogen, So that's a bigger risk. So the sugars and the alcohol have to go. And then there's another hormone called IGF-1, which is a hormone that the liver makes, and that's increased in us if we eat a lot of meat and dairy. So we have to and that increases breast cancer risk sevenfold if it's elevated. If IGF-1 is elevated, sevenfold increased risk of breast cancer. If insulin is elevated, a threefold increased risk of breast cancer. If estrogen is elevated, a twofold increased risk of breast cancer. So we want to, so that gives us a lot of information right there about what to eat.
You know, what you said before about lifestyle, what you said just now about hormones is less dairy, less meat, less sugar, less alcohol, more movement.
Yeah, simple.
Simple stuff. But you're going to go into much more detail, aren't you? Because you've got a course coming up.
Yes.
For us.
Yes.
The essentials for preventing it's a breast health class, but you're going to cover essentials for preventing breast cancer.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you'll be doing?
Yeah, so I really want to empower women and to make it doable and sustainable and to create this lifestyle shift so that for the rest of our lives, we are proactive at reducing the risk of this disease, and hopefully that translates to teaching our daughters and the women around us. My focus, my vision has always been it's going to be women teaching other women that will reduce this risk, because the medical profession isn't doing anything about it. The politicians aren't doing anything about it. The businesses aren't doing anything. How long have we known that breast cancer is the biggest disease in women in the world? A long time. Who's out there with a prevention program? Nobody.
Yeah.
So it's just there's so much industry built around it that we need to be the ones that are educating one another. So I'll talk about all the environmental links to breast cancer, how to reduce our exposure to those. I'll talk about some dietary changes that can be made to implement to reduce risk. I'll talk about some key supplements. I'll talk about how to manage hormones to reduce your risk. I'll talk about some of the psychological, spiritual factors that can reduce risk. There's a big link also between trauma, early childhood trauma, and breast cancer. So we can explore that a little bit. And so it's
so just a lot more of what we've been talking about, but just much more detail.
Yes.
It sounds fascinating. I can't wait. Thank you, first of all, for your important work. It's clearly very heartfelt and very needed. So thank you for spending most of your adult life doing the heavy lift.
It's a little hobby, a hobby of mine, and it's great. Everyone needs a hobby.
It seems like your hobby has just taken over your
I've got so many other things that I do. This is just one piece.
Okay, good. All right, good to hear. But thank you for talking with us today. I've learned a lot, and I can't wait for your course. And so we'll see you very soon. And we'll see you all very soon. Thank you for tuning in for YogaUOnline. Bidding you all a wonderful day. Bye-bye.